Let's discuss with our panel. We have with us Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, a retired LAPD police sergeant. Also in studio, we have CNN's Gloria Borger and Nia Malika Henderson, as well as Politico's Laura Barón Lopez. Let me start with you, Sergeant. The president wants to go after rogue gun dealers. These are individuals who fail to run the background checks that are required. They falsify records. They sell to somebody who is prohibited from having a gun. Is it that simple? Just get rid of their gun license?
Well, I mean, it's a start, and I don't ever say no to anything. I've often said that, you know, these kinds of guns and ammunition are unnecessary in an urban environment, and so it's a good first step.
And Laura, let me ask you, for the average policeman or woman out there, it must be really a case of whiplash, because a year ago, they were hearing, or 2 years ago, when was it exactly? I guess it was a year ago. They were hearing defund the police. Police were being demonized by many activists out there, and now there are calls from the president for more funding to police forces because of this horrific crime wave.
Right, and through it all, though, Biden was always saying he wanted to give more money to police, actually angering activists and angering Black Lives Matter protesters. And so you heard him talk about that there. And also what was interesting was earlier today, Jen Psaki was trying to get ahead of what the attacks from Republicans about addressing police and about defund the police. And what she said was that in the rescue plan, there was funding to help cop programs, and that no Republicans voted for it. So she said you would think that maybe Republicans are the ones that want to defund the police. You heard that's clearly something that the White House is going to be pushing more and more. But you also heard Biden talk at the end about community prevention programs. And that is something that is also, more money for that is in the Families Plan. And there's a big question about whether or not that'll finally be passed, clearly in the reconciliation bill that Biden is going to try to pursue, either after the bipartisan infrastructure deal or just go it alone without the bipartisan deal. But that's his way of telling activists and telling others that are working in the communities with people that he's trying to listen to them and use these other methods of addressing the violence.
And Nia Malik, one of the things that we were talking about while the president was speaking, he was talking about the fact that it's the summer. There are a bunch of young men and women out there with not much to do,
Right.
And funding for, and sometimes they get into trouble, and funding for these programs, community programs, would be beneficial. And it reminded me of the 1990s and the idea of midnight basketball, which was mocked a lot by Republicans, but the truth is that sometimes programs like that are effective.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we were talking about that during the break, and it was sort of like Back to the Future, but that is one of the things that Biden was talking about even back then. And you talk to activists, local folks in different communities, and these are the kinds of things they want. Investment in these communities in terms of activities for kids who are on the streets, summer jobs programs, which are very popular in cities all across the country, including here in D.C. You know, I thought Biden's presentation was a bit low energy for the urgency that I think people are feeling in different cities and in towns and rural communities across the country. But in terms of the substance of what he's saying, it does feel like there is something immediate that he can do, which will please folks on the ground in these different communities and not completely alienate some of the activists who have been calling for more defunding the police or restructuring some of the funding that goes to police officers. But we'll see what this summer brings and how immediate the effects will be seen.
And Gloria, just on the subject of laws to address guns getting into the wrong hands, President Biden and then two NRA-backed senators, Pat Toomey, Republican, Joe Manchin, Democrat, pushed to close what's called the gun show loophole, so that everyone would have to go through a background check, even if it was a private sale at a gun show. And that couldn't pass. And that was in the immediate aftermath of the horrific Sandy Hook shooting, 20 6- and 7-year-olds slaughtered. If they couldn't get it done then, can they get it done now?
I mean, that's what's so depressing about all of this. I mean, we recall that. We remember that. We remember when they couldn't get that through. and how disappointed members of Congress were
Toomey was
about
stunned.
it.
Yeah.
Toomey was stunned. Manchin was
was
stunned.
stunned,
Obama,
everybody, yeah.
Obama was stunned. And Joe Biden has been dealing with this issue of assault weapons for decades. And here he is. He started out today by saying, you know, I've been dealing with this. He said, I've been at this a long time.
Yeah.
And he has been at it a long time. So the question is, will they be able to do it this time? And of course, you'd have to say that the odds are against it, which is very sad to say. But what he put out today was, okay, we're going to give you money. Yes, we're going to fund the police. We are going to do that. But we are also going to look at social programs. We're going to crack down on gun dealers who don't pay attention to what the laws are. So they call it a multi-pronged approach,
Right.
but they're trying to attack it from all different ways. And I think that makes a lot of sense to people, but the political bumper sticker remains, which is that the Democrats don't want to throw as much money only at the police as they want to do it at all kinds of programs. And that is what Republicans will say about it.
And Cheryl, let me ask you, as a former LAPD sergeant, what do cops need to make the streets safer? What do communities need to not have to make so many calls to the police?
Well, certainly the effort must be a collaboration between the two, and it's going to be very difficult to realize that as long as there's a lack of trust. And we continue to realize that based on the things that are occurring in communities. And so my hope and concern now is that there won't be elephant hunters out there who are living for the overtime that's going to come to work these specialized units, much like the one in Portland where officers stepped away from the rapid response team here in LA. We have Metropolitan Division to become overzealous and militaristic with the community because there's an influx of money now to support that.
All right, Sergeant, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody here in studio with